Hello, everybody. This is Debbie Eno from Teacher Success Coach. On the Sunday, where I look at the mental health of educators and students, how can we support students and educators, especially around this time? And I've got two guests with me, an educator and someone who deals with mental health issues, etc. So can my two guests please introduce yourself? The interesting thing about my two guests are now from England. Very rare I have my guests from the UK. My guests normally are across the waters. But today my two guests are right close to me in the UK. I was expecting someone from India, but they have not arrived, so I'm not too sure what's happening there. So let me introduce my two guests. Welcome, guys. Thank you very much for coming on board. I do appreciate it quite a lot. Can you please introduce yourselves and say what you do and where you're from, etc. Thanks a lot. Take it away.
Josephine, you're going to go first. Ladies first.
All right then. Thank you, Matt. All right. My name is Josephine. I'm a teacher. I teach further education. So I teach from, anything from 14 years old up until, adult. I teach health and social care, and I live in the UK.
Thank you for that, Josephine.
Hello, thank you for the invite, Debbie. So my name's Matt. Sharky is my childhood name that as more people know me as, so I've used both of them today. So what I do is after counselling and psychotherapy training and becoming a counsellor, I went into holistic therapies, more to do with spirituality, physical mind, the mental mind, intuition, certain things that you may call woo-woo. And now I help people get out of their own way when things come up in life like procrastination, stress, depression, whichever whatever signal comes up for you, that's usually when people approach me. And I've been speaking the last year. I spoke to 150 kids because I reached out to teachers because there were certain things that I felt would benefit them to look at in the way that I work, and that was not forced on them, that was offered to them, and the feedback was excellent. So that's why I'm probably here today, to learn from you guys and also see what we can do to help educators and students through this lockdown.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much to my guests, and thank you very much, my Facebook audience, for joining us. Right, one of the things that we know that people are struggling with, especially educators and students. Yes, I'm interested in other people as well, but my forte is educators and students. Around this time, there's a lot of issue regarding the mental health of the educators and students, because educators are now forced to take on more and more in terms of being a parent now, also being a supporter, being a counselor, being everything. So educators now, they're everything. And the interesting thing about it as well, they also need the support. When they're supporting everyone else, who is supporting them? That's something we need to be mindful about. It is okay for people saying to educators, this is your job. Yes, we know it is our job, but we didn't buy into being the front line. And unfortunately, we are now in the front line of everything that is happening, with the front line in terms of the parents, the government, the politician, and the students. And a lot of educators now jobs. The interesting thing about it is everywhere other jobs are now on lockdown in the UK, but schools are still open. So educators are on the front line, which we did not, we didn't sign up for that, but unfortunately we need to educate the students, because we also find out that when we had the first lockdown, the increase in mental health and suicide rate among the young people was increasing, and it was extremely high due to those factors that the young people, they're social beings. As human beings, we're social beings anyway, and young people are even more so, and they're told that they cannot socialize with their friends, and that had a major impact on the well-being of those students. And even more so in terms of educators, because educators weren't able to see their students. They didn't know what was happening with the students, didn't know how their students were getting on. They didn't even know if the students were alive. So that actually had a major impact. And when I actually went back to school in September, one of the things I've asked my students, how have you guys been during the lockdown? The feedback was amazing, because a lot of them were suffering mental health issues. Some of them considered suicide. And these are things that nobody knew about because they did not express it to anyone, and they felt they couldn't express it to anyone. So when they actually came back to the physical classroom, educators had to be dealing with that. They had to find ways to navigate these young people, to explain to them, okay, you know, yes, we understand that you were on lockdown and it was isolating, etc., but suicide was not the answer and is not the answer. But what could you tell these young people? How could we support them? And it's a really worrying situation. Even though we are back in the classroom, schools are still open now, etc., the students are still suffering from mental health issue, and it is on the increase. And I keep on saying that by December, we will really see the full nature of the mental health of these young people, because they're now prevented from doing what they love to do, socializing. So what I want to find out from my guests is, how could we support these students? How could we support these educators? What could we do to help them to see things differently? You know, before lockdown, there was, you know, 4 out of 3 educators out of 4 were saying that they're suffering from some degree of stress. 13% of educators, you know, compared with other professions, was suffering from stress, anxiety, and frustration, etc. That's before the lockdown. So now you could imagine how high this is. So what could we do? How can we help them? So I've just said enough, you guys. What can you offer our educators out there and our students out there? We know other people are having the same stress, they're having stress level, but we need to realize that educators are responsible for educating and imparting knowledge on the young people, on individual. So the amount of pressure they have is even more so, because in everybody's life, they have been an educator. So how could we help? Right, I'm just throwing it out to my panel. What are you guys gonna say to us? Who's gonna take the lead? Josephine, as an educator, what do you think that you guys need, and how you guys can support your students in terms of the mental health, in terms of the physical well-being, in terms of the intellectual, in terms of the emotional factor, you know, the social factor, the spiritual factor, the psychological factors? How can we help you guys to then help your students?
I think right now the government are doing the best thing, which is keeping schools open. I think that's a good move, keeping the schools open, because you know, because it will help these you know, learners to keep their mental health going. And keeping because as beings we need you know, what do you call it, we need routine, and routine is good for every person. You know, I remember the school that I worked in during the lockdown, you know, they had a routine where classes were still going on, which makes it easier for these students, because they knew they had to wake up in the morning to come to their lesson. You know, whether they liked it or not, they still have to get up in the morning. Whereas some people who didn't have that opportunity, some students from other schools that I know, some students in other schools where work had been posted on, for example, Google Classroom, and the students were were responsible for their own learning, which I think is very important. But I think in a way, you know, teachers are also responsible in making sure that these students are getting the work done. So in a nutshell, so some people were being left behind because they were not going to do what they were meant to be doing. But when my school that I worked in, when they had you know, when they had usual classes, so actually you have to wake up at the time you have your lesson. You have to log on to the time of each of your lessons. So which means even though we're on lockdown, you're going to have to log on. So, but the hard part of that was some students didn't have the technology to do that. So which was quite difficult. And another part was they didn't have the conducive environment to have done that as well. So which affected some students because they were not in the right environment. Some didn't have the right technology. Some had computers, but they didn't have internet. Some had internet, but they didn't have computers, or perhaps they were sharing computers with their siblings or whatever. So, but going back to your question, Debbie, what could we do in supporting these students? I think right now, keeping the school accessible, keeping the schools open, making sure that, the school is a safe place for them to be able to say, okay, so for people who aren't able to, access the things which I spoke about earlier on, like the computers, like the technology, like the internet, are able to still, be able to participate in that. So, and also apart from all of that, I think, somewhere for them to be able to speak their mind when they feel, even pandemic aside, students come from different backgrounds or whatever. They come from different, different situation. Everyone has a different issue that they face in one way or another, pandemic aside. So imagine that alone. So students always need, a safe place for them to be able to express themselves. They always need something to be able to say, okay, some people perhaps get angry when they are put in a certain situation. It doesn't mean they're bad. It's just that's the way they express themselves. So what can you do in order for you to chant that anger into something that's positive? And that's and that's what schools really should be there. And as an educator, it might just be I remember last year I had a student who she couldn't keep still. She literally couldn't keep still. And every time when I'd given her a task that was taking a very long time for her to do, she becomes disruptive. When I quickly realized that, okay, actually, hang on a minute, this is somebody that needs to be kept busy at all times. So I had to give her short tasks, each time. And she was also my helper. Whenever I needed things to be done, I would ask her to do stuff. I would give her short tasks that wouldn't take her a long time to do. At the same time, she needed to get the benefit of what all her other peers were getting as well. But that's because she was right there with me for me to be able to assess that, for me to be able to do that. But if she wasn't with me, she probably would have locked off her computer. She probably would have, shut the computer down and just walked away and not engaged, because she's somebody who couldn't keep still. She's somebody who gets really agitated so quickly, and she needed something to always chant her energy into something. So when she was with me in the classroom, I always have to be on my toes with her. I always have to make sure that I chant her energy into something that wasn't always a battle. Because initially, when I first started teaching her, it was a battle. It was always keep still, sit down. Why are you getting up? Why are you? She will stand up in the middle of my classroom. She will start singing. She will stand up. She will just get up. She will just tell me, oh, I want to go and pick this up. Or she will stand up. She want to go and talk to somebody on the other side of the room. So it was always a battle with her initially, but eventually, I realized that very quickly that, okay, I needed to chant those energy into something that's really, really positive. So those are the things that I feel educators and schools could do in order to support students in this era of uncertainty, especially. Over to you, Matt.
Thank you for that, Josephine. Yes, Matthew, what do you think?
Wow, well, thanks for what I've heard so far. And I want to just remind you guys and everyone else that's watching that I cannot say to stand in an educator's shoes. So how can I help an educator when I don't know what they have to do, really? So my first question would be the responsibility. What is the educator's responsibility? You guys will know as educators what your responsibilities are. When it comes to the mental health of students, are you there as an educator and a counsellor? Are you there as an educator, a counsellor and a confidant, a friend? How many different roles are you playing? And the reason I ask that question is, if an educator feels like they have to fulfill every role there is, then what that is a lot of stress, a lot of baggage, I would assume. I don't know, because I'm not an educator, but I would understand it to be a lot of responsibility. So when I say that, I'm not saying that they should outsource this responsibility, but what I do think would be wise is to understand and know what your responsibility is, and be very clear on that with your employers, and maybe with the students. This was my experience. I went into a school last year and I did a PowerPoint and I shared my story at the end. 9 years ago to this day, I'd just woken up from a coma because I tried to kill myself. And I shared this story at the end of the lesson, and the kids were like gobsmacked, and loads of them asked me loads of questions, and a few of them stayed behind just to say thank you for sharing my story. There was a young Indian lad hanging around. He was right at the front of the class, and he hanged around to the very end, and he walked out with me, and he said, "I wanted to speak to you if I can." I was like, "Yeah, sure. What can I help you with, or what do you want to talk about?" And he said, "Well, I just wanted to say thanks for sharing your story, because about a week ago, I even considered ending my life." This lad was like 13. Now, part of my heart broke when he said that, because I can't remember feeling that way when I was that age. So in that moment, I thought to myself, okay, what is my responsibility now? So I came into this school through invitation. There was no agreement that I had to do this or this. There was no written anything that I was there for any purpose. What is my responsibility? This is a question I ask myself, because it is important to me in the work that I do to know what my responsibility is. When I started training as a counsellor, I thought it was my responsibility to fix everyone. I could tell you that is a long, hard road, because that is not my job, and that is not my power. I'm not God. So my responsibility in that moment was to leave that school with a clear conscience, that I felt confident for his safety, and that if that occurred to him again, that thought process, he would know what to do with it. So this is the questions I asked, if I'm going to share that with you, if this is going to be helpful. This is what I said as I remember it. The first thing I said was to clarify how he was feeling in this moment. And he said that he felt a lot better. It still comes back occasionally, but he's been a lot better off, been a lot better, been feeling a lot better. I was like, okay, that's great. That's good to hear. I said, is this the first time you shared that with anyone? He said, yeah, it is. So I think I heard Debbie say at the beginning that you asked these kids how they've been doing over lockdown, and no one had been saying anything to anyone. And if I may, I'll come back to that, because again, that is maybe something that is going on with the kids, that they don't feel they feel responsible for what they say and share in their households to their friends, there may be something there that is important to consider. So he said, no, I haven't. And I was like, okay. And I said, well, I'm really touched you shared that with me. I'm wondering, you know, how likely are you to share that with anyone again if it comes up? And he says, I think I would. I said, okay, who do you think you'd share it with? And he said, well, if you were here, you. I was like, okay, great. I said, have you got anyone at school? I can't remember if they had a school counsellor, or I think they had like wellness people that were there for mental health, possibly. And then he said, oh, I wouldn't share it with the teacher, but I would share it with one of the other people in the school. I was like, okay. And then I said, the last thing I asked him was, firstly, I thanked him for sharing that. I wanted to acknowledge him for being open and vulnerable, which I think a young man finds very hard to do. So I acknowledged him and thanked him for that. And then I also made the agreement with him. I said, can we make an agreement now that if I'm not here, or, you know, if it comes across again, that you will share it with someone and try and help yourself that way, if that's what you need. And he said, yeah. And he shook my hand and smiled. And I walked out of that school with no baggage. And that for me was a monumental moment, because I realized in that moment that my only responsibility is for someone to help themselves understand what they can do to help themselves. So just as, I hope that's been all right for the educators, what it could help, you know, the responsibility, being very clear on that. But maybe the students, I mean, this is something else. I mean, I'm not sure, you know, is it you guys, I would assume, already have a massive workload. But, you know, if there was a place or an opportunity to help young people manage their own mental health, who would do that? And I say manage their own, because that is massively important. Because we're not taught to manage our own mental health, are we? I don't think we are. I think we're taught to need other people. I think may not be consciously. I think we're taught to be quiet, hide away when we're struggling. I think, you know, and I'm not going to ramble on that one. All I'm going to say is there's no one ever taught me about the holistic aspects of life. You know, when someone says something to you, what does that mean? No one ever said to me, what if that's their projection? What if that is their opinion of you through their perspective, because they're seeing you in a different value system? No one ever said that to me. So we've grown up thinking that anyone that says something to us that's maybe not too nice, part of us believes that. And that's okay, but maybe there's only truth in it for them. So I hope that's answered your question. I apologise if I went on a little bit there. Get very passionate when I talk about this stuff. So, yeah, I hope that's answered your question.
That's fantastic. You've asked a question which I'm going to answer. You said that what educators' roles are. When we actually signed up for this, when I signed up for this job, I could only speak to myself. For myself, I signed up to be an educator. However, when you go into the classroom, you need to look at those students as holistic beings that come to you. So they come to you with a backpack on the back. And before you could actually start putting in the intellectual knowledge in those students, you need to start unpacking that backpack. Because what's in that backpack is the emotional factor, the psychological factor, the social factor, the educational take a real low part. So as an educator, you need to unpack all of that, because some of them are coming to you where the school is the most safe environment for them to be in, because they're coming from a home that some of them are very unstable, and there are a lot of anxiety in that home. There are a lot of toxic energy in that home. So when they come to you in that school, that is the safest place for them. So even though we signed up as educators, you cannot be educator until you start unpacking the baggage of that student. And one of it can be the mental health of that student. Yes, we are not qualified as counselors, but we are providing a safe space for those students to talk. So we are holding a safe space for them to enable them to unpack, and for us to unpack that backpack they have in the back. Because I find that as an educator, as much as I am fortunate because my background in psychology, and I'm also, I also do various therapy, etc. And I've done, counseling. So for me, I am fortunate that I know how to, navigate those. But as educators per se, we are not taught those things. So you actually gain those skills on your feet, because you have to help the students in your care, because you need to support them in order for them to learn what they come to the school to do. However, some of them cannot learn until you unpack the package they've got on their back, and that might be their mental health issues. And that's the sad thing about it. As much as we know what our roles are, we are thrown dual roles, multiple roles. We wear multiple hats because no one else is there at the time for that student. So as an educator, you are there right there at the time, and a student is telling you how they feel. You have no choice than to listen to how they're feeling. So therefore, yes, you're a confidant. You're also the unqualified counselor. You're also the unqualified mentor. The things you're qualified in is an educator. But unfortunately, we are playing all those roles, because when that student comes to you, that student is not coming to you just to be educated. That student is coming to you with a backpack on the back full of all these things. And one of the things I found that when I went to one of the other schools before this one is, when they came from lockdown, when I went back in September, I went back 3 weeks after the student have started. And I felt, bearing in mind my background in psychology, and I've done all these mind, courses, etc., I found that a number of the students, I felt I was very, very chatty. And I thought to myself, okay, there are issues going on with the students. So that's how I asked them, how were you feeling during lockdown? Have anybody spoken to you about that? And nobody thought or had the presence of mind to ask the students how they were really feeling, because their behavior issues were not just the behavior. The behavior was coming from a range of other things that was going on with them. That's how I found out a number of them said they wanted to commit suicide. They hated lockdown because they couldn't, go out with their friends. And for me, my lesson was an hour and a half, but I spent that hour and a half allowing the students to unpack some of the issues that they were going through, which no one thought it was necessary to ask them, because maybe my colleagues saw it as they were coming in a place for intellectual knowledge. So therefore, that is what they should be given. However, they cannot accept that when there's so many other things going on in this mind, because the mind is a very creative thing. It actually could give you such fantastic creative stories. You never realize that, oh my goodness, I am not creative, but look at what's coming out of my mind. And that was necessary for me. The only reason why I was able to do that, as I said, my background is not just an educator. So therefore, I'm able to see into that more than most of my colleagues. So that's some of the factors there. So to answer your question, Matt, we are very clear what our roles are as educators. However, when we are thrown into the classroom with no other remit, with a bunch of students, human beings who have a range of issues, in order for us to teach them, we need to start unpacking them before we actually get to the education factor. there is a lot of issues going on. So, and you know, as I keep on saying, for us to teach, we need to unpack, to know what's going on in their life, to know that, you know, it's like one student said to me as well, she had not eaten because she had no money, and it's like all of this thing because she was hungry, so she was falling asleep in the lesson. You know, it's like all of that, and they come into school. As educators, we have no choice than to address that. So for me, I had to send that student out of my class to go and get something to eat before she could come back, and then she could get the knowledge which I'm there to give her. Because she's not going to get the knowledge because she's hungry. So the role of an educator, you know, we wear 20 or more caps. And the sad thing about it is society still feel that we should be wearing more caps, because anything that society cannot fix, oh, it is the fault of the teachers. It's the fault of the educator. This is what they should be doing. This is what they're paid for. This is the role. Our role, in essence, is to educate and not anything else. But because of what's going on in society, we are everything else except the educator at that time. And yet still, when things are going wrong, we are blamed for all ills in society. You know, I'm very, very passionate when it comes to that, because I just think that, you know, educators get a raw deal where everybody feels that we're supposed to be fixing. You say something really fantastic, Matt, when you say that fix. Everybody expects us to fix people. We cannot fix anything. People need to be fixing themselves. We give them the tools, you know, to hopefully fix themselves. That's the thing about it. And I keep saying to people that I do not care a damn about intellectual. The reason for that is it is more challenging to sort out someone who've got mental health issue than it is to sort out someone who is intellectual behind. Because intellectually behind, you could actually catch up by giving them extra work. But if they're mentally broken, it is more difficult to fix. Josephine.
Yes.
What are your take on all of this?
Yeah, to an extent, I agree with what you've just said. You know, you need to be able to sort out your mental health before you are able to you know, impact knowledge onto the people you're going to teach. So they need to be able to grasp it. If someone hasn't slept, there's no how you're going to be able to teach that person, because that person's not going to be listening. So whatever you're saying at that point will be pointless, so to say, because that learner maybe has a parent who is a drunk and hasn't slept, and you're there in their face to say that, do this, I'm talking to you, why are you sleeping? So if you say, why are you sleeping, wake up, you know, but actually he hasn't slept all night, and the warmest place he's been so far is your classroom, and you're saying, wake up, I'm talking to you, when I talk to you I need you to put your head up. You know, that's not going to help. So perhaps find out why that learner is sleeping in the first place. And sometimes it might just be because they've played a game all night, you know. So everything isn't all gloom and doom, you know. It's having to understand what it is, and as an educator you have to be able, you know, when you ask that question, Matt, and I was shaking my head, you know, what is your role? I was shaking my head, and Debbie said it all. You have to look at every learner holistically. You have to be everything: a friend, a teacher, someone they can speak to, you know, someone they can, you know, you have to be able to have that skill to be able to you know, fit in the blanks, to be able to impact that knowledge, because learner isn't going to listen if they're not all right. And your main goal is to make sure that before this person leaves your classroom, they have learned a thing or two. And if that learner isn't listening because they've got X, Y, Z going on, or because they've played a game all night, you need to be able to ascertain that and get that done and get that fixed. And yeah, so my intake in what you said, I do agree to an extent, but you know, the bit where I don't agree with you is that intellectual. Yeah, well, you've kind of said it. You know, was it you that said it? Was it, you know, was it Matt that said it? That it's easier to fix someone who is intellectually bright rather than someone who has mental health issues. So that, you know, someone who has mental health issues, you need to fix that issue first before you do the thing before you teach them intellectually, because that mental health issues can crumble that learner if care is not taken. So, you know, so to an extent, it's a balance. It's a balance that sometimes you need to be able to ascertain that as a teacher. When I go into my classroom, I find out what what each learner is, and I would really, really hate, maybe because the type of person that I am, I would hate to feel that there's a learner in my classroom who has an issue, because one thing I go into a classroom is that it's a safe place and I'm a safe person to speak to. Maybe because I'm not that old, you know, I might be a little bit relatable. Well, I'm young at heart. I might be a little bit relatable. You know, so I like to think that, you know, I still got the lingo, as they say. Sometimes they teach me a little bit, you know. So I like to think that you know, every learner who comes, because that's the first thing I let them know, you know, that it's safe to speak to me. I can't promise it will stay here, but what I will promise is that whatever issue it is, you know, we will get it. We will have a goal in getting it sorted, and you know, but you need to speak first in getting that done, you know. So that I can promise in trying to get help, however way we can, you know. And you know, so I try to make every person that comes into contact with me, because I do understand the importance of mental health. So yeah, Debbie, to an extent I agree with what you're saying. So yeah.
Okay, so what tips can we give educators in order to support themselves and in order for them to support their students? Because first and foremost, they need to be able to support themselves before they could support someone else. And something you say, Matt, which is so good and it keep on resonating with me, it really resonates with me and it keep on going through my mind, is we're not here to fix anybody. And that is something I am going to constantly remind educators, because you see, as educators, they always seem to feel that they could fix people and that they're to help everybody and make sure everybody's good. Realistically, we can't fix anybody. And I say to students myself, one of the things I say, I keep on going back to Maslow's theory, Maslow hierarchy of needs, that says that individuals are responsible for their own action, their own life, their own, you know, destination, etc. And I say to my students, even on Wednesday, I say, okay, I am here to give you the knowledge. However, you need to take responsibility. So if you fail your course, you fail your A-levels, etc., that's not my business. Because you know what? I am here to give you the knowledge. You need to make sure that you find a way to learn the information I give you. You need to take responsibility for your own well-being. And you need to make sure that you are accountable to yourself instead of projecting it onto someone else. When you are not taking responsibility, it means that you are failing to progress and you put all your intention, everything else onto someone and saying that this person is responsible. But Miss, you're responsible. No, Miss is not responsible. Miss' responsibility is to make sure she gives you the knowledge. Your responsibility, which I love Maslow's theory, that you are responsible for your action. You need to own it. And that is something that people are failing to do. And parents, I am a parent myself, but I'm going to call up parents on that. A lot of parents are not owning the responsibility of their children. They seem to feel that that is the role of the educators, or it is your job. You guys remember out there, our job is to give your child the knowledge. We cannot open their head to put it in it. We could just give them the knowledge. We could encourage them. We could empower them as much as we can. But parents, you have a responsibility. And parents are failing to see that they have a responsibility because, oh, you're a teacher. I am a teacher up to a point. I could just give your child the knowledge. I could support your child, but you need to do something too. You know, so that's why I love Maslow's theory. Individual are responsible. And we need to start taking on the responsibility. It doesn't matter how young the children are. We need to make them start taking some form of responsibility, or else they're going to always feel that this is your job. It's like a student said to me on 2 weeks ago, because I've been in the school for 3 weeks. And it's a private school. And I do not believe in chalk and talk. But in that particular school, the students have been programmed to talk and chalk, etc., etc. So I went in with my innovative self and start giving the students, you know, like group exercise because they could walk in the bubble, etc. One student, because I said, okay, you guys could read first, and then I'll explain, and then you guys get together and summarize, etc. One student turned around and said to me, Miss, that's your job. You're the teacher. You're supposed to be doing it for us. That's what you're getting paid to do. I stood in front of the class, I breathed deeply, I walked towards the board, and I'm going through my head. Am I going to walk out of this class, or am I going to challenge the students, or am I going to deal with it differently? I turned around and I said, okay, I hear your point. Remember, you also need to take responsibility. Yes, I'm here to teach you, but you also need to be making sure that whatever I'm telling you, you're able to learn it as well. I know what my job is, but you know what? You guys read the topic I've given you, summarize it, then I'm going to come back as a whole group and check and summarize the area and put my input, and then we move on from there. She said, okay, miss. And I looked at that, I'm thinking, there it is again. You are being paid to teach us. So where that information come from? It's a learned behavior, isn't it? Exactly. That's what society have been saying throughout this lockdown, that teachers don't want to teach, teachers are lazy, you know, teachers, you know, they have issues, they want to be on holidays, but people are failing to realize these teachers you're talking about, just look at us. We are just like you, everyone else. We also have our fears, we also have our anxiety, we are also parents, we are also wives, husbands, etc. That's the issue. Over to you, Matt. I've said a lot.
Yeah. Well, no, sorry. Yeah, that's just. I mean, like you said, I think, you know, I've never had a problem in the past, but that's why I said before, I'm not an educator like you two, so you cannot. I find it I think it's very hard to judge someone's perspective when you're not in their shoes. You just can't do it. Even with the president of the US, Donald Trump, or the other guy, no matter what you think about them, you have no idea what it's like to do their job. Same with the Prime Minister during this time. That's just my opinion. But that would be the same with anyone, in my opinion. You cannot talk from their perspective or even understand their perspective unless you're asked to find that out and even try and walk alongside them in that journey. And it sounds like all the hats you're wearing as a teacher, maybe that's something that other educators can consider doing. I think you and Josephine said that. You know, how are you going to absorb anything academically if you're not sleeping or you've been thinking about doing whatever to yourself? You know, is that something that all educators do, or do they worry about, you know, the upcoming exams or, you know, the whatever's on the curriculum that they've got to get taught before a certain date for Christmas or whatever. That's what I heard. I heard that you and Josephine say that, and I wonder if that's something that educators can consider doing for themselves if they don't do it. Because again, you know, it sounds like to me, you got some students coming in your class and you find out that 50% of them have been struggling with mental health. I'll be right in thinking that their well-being is more important than their exam results in that time. Because I don't know how you feel about, again, this is about expectations and what you're expected, you know, what people saying are blame it on the teacher and, you know, they didn't do well in their exams. Yeah, why is that? Because everyone can play a bit of a part in that. If the pupils are struggling and their teachers are giving them the support they need, but their parents ain't, they're going to struggle, man. And vice versa, maybe. And also, you know, it's easy for kids to hide away when they're struggling and start wagging it and start not turning up for school and not doing their homework. If things are bad, I talk from experience on that. It was a long time since I was in school, but I didn't go to school for the last year, really. That was easy for me because it was easy to turn my brain off. You know, so maybe that's something educators can think of is from your wisdom, you know, that if there are students there that are something they're manifesting behaviors in things, you're going to look at them in your experience, you're going to know that something's up with them because you're going to compare that experience of them to the other time, the other lessons, and like, oh, usually they're a bit more active. I wonder if there's anything wrong, and maybe there's something you can you know, you could ask. And another thing, maybe again, like the example I used, maybe there's some way that would help educators so when their responsibility is in the classroom, but it's not outside the classroom or the school, correct?
Well, it shouldn't be.
It shouldn't be. That's really interesting for me because that shows that a part of you or a part of educators, probably maybe all educators, will always feel a part that their responsibility to people when they even leave the campus. And that's something that maybe another thing that can help, because if you're carrying everyone's baggage, like you were saying about the backpack analogy, if you unpacking all the kids' backpacks, but you're taking that shit home, that's a lot of baggage you're taking home as well. So is there any way you can leave it at school? Is there any way in the last 10 minutes of the class, like Josephine said, you know, that hopefully they've learned something today, they've done something, they've took something away from the lesson in the last 10 minutes, is there any way you can say, look, let's talk about what's going on now? Who's struggling? Who's friends with who? Who do you call when you're having a bad day? Or who spoke to who over lockdown? Who's been hanging around with each other and speaking regularly? You know, is there anything that we guys can agree as a class to look after each other, or, you know, to be there for each other when we're in school? And that, sorry, I'm just throwing out ideas, but I think hopefully you get the gist of what I'm saying. You know, being able to leave the baggage, the metaphorical baggage that you take on as an educator in that school, as much as you can. A part of you will always take it home, I get that, because of what you do. You're caring nature, compassionate. It's I've got a few friends that are teachers, and they some of them, like, they haven't got kids and they love their kids like their own kids, like, not in a metaphorically speaking. You know, they
we all do.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what you mean. I call them my children, but then I mean my students.
Yeah, and that's on, even when I've been invited into school, I've had the same thing of the guys that I've spoke to, the classes. They're like, some of these kids, they love them. See, that's what's going to get us through this, is love, really, whether it's metaphorical or not. And that's not something that we're taught to share, is it? if anything.
That's true.
People's hearts are more protected and more blocked for, you know, because it's not nice getting your heart broken. It's easier for you to close that up and walk around, live in your head, live up from this upwards, and don't even think about this.
Yeah.
And that's when heart attacks start happening, heart problems, strokes. So
do you know what, Matt?
Yeah.
You know, from what you just said just now, I'll give you 2 examples. I totally agree with speaking to students and letting them know that they should be kind to each other. In fact, I usually encourage everyone to have like a WhatsApp group or Instagram group or whatever, however it is that, you know, these young kids keep together, because when someone's not at college or whatever, they're able to say, oh, this was what was done, like this happened, that was done, and that was done. And it's my motto is we're all in it together. Yeah. You know, if one person is struggling, we're all struggling. If one person isn't doing very well, then we're not all doing very well. So we all have to help each other. But where that failed, there was you know, that worked very well with my level 2s. Where that failed for me was my level 3s, where some people were not being nice to each other outside of class, and they have, you know, there was some bullying going on outside of the classroom, and having to facilitate that and trying to quickly move on that, you know, it was really, really hard, because you're the one who was encouraging, speaking together, trying to, you know, get everyone to help each other. It worked very well with my level 2s, and they so, you know, like if I would say, oh, did you speak to XYZ, even the most quietest person in that class who doesn't even say speak, you know, doesn't even squeak in the class, they all speak to her, and they all make sure that, you know, that they get on very well, because some people are strong, some people aren't so strong. So they all worked very well together in my level 2s. But the level 3s, it was horrific. The bullying that was going on, you know, it was horrific. Having to dismantle that, it was horrific, you know, and you know, management stepping in, trying to find out what the problem was, not necessarily because I told them to you know, to make a group, but because they had a group, you know, by themselves, and then something happened, someone said something, and it all just went out of control. Can you see whether, you know, how it can work very well, and it can also go kaput in your face as well, because you can never ascertain what these you know, what these children are thinking. You can never ascertain, you know what they could do. You know, some of them are just so innocent and so lovely, and whereas some of them are so you know, so hormonal, and at that age they all are, some more than others, you know, and they all express it in different ways, and some come out a bit more you know, a bit more aggressive than others, you know. So was, you know, so I don't know if there's anything else you can perhaps think of that could perhaps help. I don't know, you know. So yeah.
Yeah. Okay, can we identify 3 tips that we could use for, you know, what educators could use with themselves and their students, and you know, more so with themselves, because when they actually sort themselves out, it's easier to sort out the students. One of the things I feel that we as educators need to be very much aware is expectation. That's a big thing, because
Big word.
Yeah, it's a big thing. And I think that educators, we don't take on this as seriously as we ought to. Because you see, the students come in with a set of expectations. It's either from society or from the parents, and they expect the educators to fulfill those expectations. However, the educators are not aware of those expectations until things start going pear-shaped. And then it comes up, oh, you should have. Why should I? I didn't know this. So when we don't know the expectations, therefore, we cannot fulfill it. And it is an assumption, because you're an educator, you are expected to do all these things automatically. And when you are saying no, or you're not able to fulfill it for whatever reason, it becomes a big issue. So that's one of my first things in terms of educators. You need to sort out expectation. And the same way for the students. Students and parents need to know what they're expecting from the tutors, from the educators, and also administrators and principal, because everybody have this expectation, but you are not saying what these expectations are. And when I don't know what is expected of me, how could I fulfill it? And another thing for educators are self-care. When you are not taking care of yourself, you cannot take care of your students, because your students are confused when you actually, for whatever reason, you are annoyed with them and they don't understand why you're annoyed with them, because they haven't seen that what they've done should warrant you being annoyed with them. However, if you are tired in the same way the students sleeping in the class and tired, you cannot fulfill your role because you're tired. So therefore, those anxiety coming out. So those are things as educators we need to be very mindful of, because we are dealing with students. We are, their lives are in our hand. And those are things in terms of you supporting the students. We are not counselors, Matt. You did tell me, you did ask us what our roles are, etc. We are not counselors, but we are flinging into this, and we need to support our students by using whatever tools we've got in our possession. Because we need to get the students to the place where we are able to teach them. So we as educators are always thinking on our feet, and whatever tools we could think about that we feel that can be useful in order to unpack this backpack, we'll have to use it. So we just have to be armed with tools constantly. And I do feel that educators, one of the things they should have in courses for educators is counseling courses. I think part of the training should be, the basic concept of counseling. That should be part of the, that should be part of teachers' training, because we have to find those tools anyway, because we're dealing with students with all these issues. So those are things we should be given in our training, so that we are even much more aware of how to use it, until that we are pushed in the corner and we have no choice than to read up on it or YouTube it or whatever in order to find these tools to support our students. So that's, that's where I'm at with what my suggestions are. Matt?
I was going to say, Josephine, want to go next? That was awesome, Debbie. Cheers.
Josephine?
Yes.
What tools, what tools are you going to give to your colleagues to support the students and to support themselves?
There's this thing that I think I like the idea that Matt said earlier on, perhaps taking maybe five minutes before the end of the lesson, or maybe at the beginning of the lesson, even though it's known that the way you start a lesson is the way you want to finish it. So perhaps maybe at the end of the lesson, maybe have 5 minutes to ask students how they feel, not just about academic, but also about, emotional. There's one thing that I have in my classroom at the moment is I have emojis. So I have emojis in my class with, different facial expression. And that emoji, I usually use it for how do you feel about the topic we've just learned today. So that's what I usually use my emoji for. So so they'll have a little note behind it, so that they don't really have to say out loud, because sometimes some people can be a little bit embarrassed about how they feel about something, because maybe their friend is sitting not too far from them and they don't want to look silly. So I give them a little note to say, how do you feel about this topic? So we could also use that to say that maybe have an emoji and have a conversation at the end of the lesson, so that students can tell you perhaps how they feel about their emotions. Maybe you can do that maybe once a week, like a safe place, to sort of look after people's emotional emotional side. And also teachers are so stretched, it's unbelievable. I know our college, we have school counselors and we have mentors. Our mentors, it's, oh my goodness, the last time our mentors, they were reading the caseload to us teachers, so that we are aware of their caseload and who they work with. It was heart touching, like what every student, they didn't go in depth, but what they have to deal with every student, that even people that you teach and you did not necessarily know this particular student has a particular issue. It makes you feel that, oh wow, so maybe perhaps have a bit more of that, mentors in around, so that students can be helped a bit more. And what else? I don't know. And like Debbie said as well, which I think would be very helpful with them doing the PGCE. I think perhaps having a module on counselling. Even though my background is sociology, so I did counselling in my sociology degree anyway, and I did a bit of psychology as well. So even though I did all of those things, I was okay with all the things that I had to do. But other people who then, their area of specialism isn't sociology or psychology might not find it as easy as someone like me or Debbie would, who understands mental health very well. An English teacher might not necessarily understand it, for example. So maybe during the PGCE program, it might be an idea for maybe the government to look at the program, or maybe is it the government or is it the respective universities to look at the program and think about, okay, maybe having this, because our young people are facing different mental health issues, so it might be it might be an idea to have a unit, a module on dealing with mental health. It might be an idea to have dealing with pandemics as well. That might be an idea too. So yeah, that's what I've got.
Mm-hmm. Yes, Matt.
Yeah, it was sorry, just on that, Josephine, it was what was it, PGSE, them lessons that I was invited in to do for the schools. So yeah.
Oh, okay, was it the PGCE or the PSHE?
PSHE.
Oh, sorry, they're not the same thing.
PSHE.
Sorry, I don't know. Tell I'm not an educator. Yeah, sorry, I just wanted to say that firstly, I wanted to say that thank you both for sharing what you have. And also, I remember when I first did my counselling training, that I turned around and I was like, everyone should at least have the opportunity to experience this, because empathy is something you do not understand until you experience it. You have to experience it with another person to understand what it is and in the power it has. And it's far much more powerful than sympathy, for example. It's completely different. So yeah, I just wanted to say to you guys that if I could do anything at your colleges, schools voluntarily that would help you or your staff, I would love to do that, because again, It might be difficult right now, but I'm just putting it out there because I haven't been to a school for a while and I miss that. So yeah. So my tips would be, I think we've already kind of gone through them. I think the expectation is massive, that Debbie said, and being clear on that. Maybe you could play the expectation game. So you could write a list of expectations with the students, and sort of say, you know, I must get an A, and then you got to write down who you think the expectation is. So if a student says, oh, you know, they read the list and it says, oh, I must get an A, they might write their parent, or they might write their teacher. So it's almost like you're trying to highlight where it's coming from. So that for me, that's something that students could do. And I just want to say that even though you may not be a counsellor, as you guys said, you are in your own way. You become a counsellor doing your job, with the feelings and the compassion that you have for your students. You will naturally be a counsellor. And with that, I think these are my tips. So for educators, even though I'm not one, if you're going to wear a hat, wear one hat at a time. So if you're playing the counsellor with the students, then you give time with that hat to play that role. And when it's lesson time, it's lesson time. You put your teacher hat on. Secondly, the responsibility. Can it stay in the classroom? Can you leave that baggage in the room? And can you make an agreement with the students, or at least bring it up and ask the question, and even ask them what they want? When I went into schools, I was surprised how little, in my experience, how little they were used to being asked. So I was like, what do you want to do next? Even though I had a lesson plan, I asked, where do you want to go next? Because we were talking about drugs or something, and they went somewhere different to where I was thinking of going, but we went there and the feedback was fantastic. It's almost like you're giving them the lead, but you're holding the reins, if that makes sense. You got the control of it, but they're driving. And giving someone the ability to drive, metaphorically speaking, gives them the power. When you give them the power, they may not feel like they need to give their power away, or they need other people to feel that power. That's what I mean by that. Is it's you know, like we've said, it's not our job to help or fix people. There's something far much more powerful about teaching people or showing people how to help themselves. I think that's why most of my clients are like, what? When I speak to them and they're like, oh, thanks for your help. I'm like, well, really, I've helped you help yourself. I haven't really done much. Just give you what you need to help yourself. So yeah. I don't know what else for educators. I think maybe the main ones come out. And students, questions, man. If you want students to, let's say students are too shy to share what's going on with them, or you feel like there's something going on but they're not saying, ask them questions. And if they don't answer, or if they ask you a question, ask a question back and get them to answer their own question. And the reason for that is, when someone says, I had to go through this as well. When someone presents something to you, it's extremely hard not to bring your values to the table and your beliefs. So you could know a student, and you could also know their parents. And when they come to you straight away and say, oh, I haven't eaten or I haven't slept, part of you might be thinking, well, I've met your parents, I'm not surprised. Or, you know, I'm not surprised when I dropped them up, when you were dropped off the other day, couldn't even see why, you know, your parents were not even present. They were like, you were talking to them, they weren't even looking at you. You know what I mean? It's like, it's very hard to not bring your experience into it. So, and the other thing is, this is something that you guys, I guarantee, you're going to struggle to wrap your head around this. And I'm not saying that in a patronizing way. I'm saying it because part of you's going to be like, what the F? And this is what I did with the kids. And this is just something I found really helpful. Or really, it would cause them to, it would inspire them to ask more questions, I think. So if they come to you, if let's say it's in a group, it's at the group and people are sharing stuff in a group, ask them to consider, you know, why they think what they're sharing is going on for them. So say that they're stressed out or they're anxious, ask them to really explore that if they're comfortable to do it. And also say to them, what's the benefit, or how does part of you benefit being really anxious? And almost any client that I've had that I flipped that back to them, I even did it at the school with the kids, and they were like, oh, there isn't no benefit. Or what do you mean there isn't no benefit? I was like, well, there must be a benefit, otherwise a part of you wouldn't want to do that. So anxiety is a signpost for something going on deep down. Anxiety is a control drama. Part of your ego is creating anxiety because it feels out of control, but it can control anxiety, but it can't control the anxiety. That doesn't make sense, does it? But it does to a part of your ego. Part of your brain creates anxiety because when it's feeling anxious, if you go and tell your parents you've got anxiety, or your teacher, a part of them, they may not expect nothing more of you at that point. They may experience you differently in that moment. They may even open themselves up to a conversation and be slightly understanding in a different way. Now, I don't know if that's true for you guys because you're educators. You can say you're full of shit, and I'm all right with that because I'm not an educator. All I say is my experience has taught me that if you are treating the symptom, then it's going to keep coming. But if you can treat the symptom and at least explore the issue and then be up for that, that's the start of something special. It really is. As soon as I started having answers for things, even theoretical answers, like Debbie was saying earlier, that I heard you say, you know, about the mind is a wonderful thing. Imagination, creativity, these are things that legends in history like Albert Einstein and Da Vinci and all these people that have made history have tapped into. There's something about that. But the brain doesn't know what's real and what's in the mind. So if you can inspire young people to be creative and inventive and look at their own answers, find their own results and answers, then there could be a possibility for some real self-help going on.
Yeah.
That made sense. I go off on a tangent when I talk about stuff, so apologies for that.
That does, you know, that's definitely makes sense. Yep. So very true. Yep. Because you see, in order to deal with the factor, you need to look at the causal factor. What are the root cause of all of that? Yeah. Okay, thank you very much, both Matt and Josephine. Is there anything else you guys want to say before I actually wrap up?
Not for me, just enjoyed the invitation. Thank you.
Not for me.
Okay, thank you very much to both my guests. Thank you very much, my Facebook audience. Educators, you do need to be very mindful of yourself. In order for you to support your students, you need to support yourself. And especially at this time, educators, you need to give yourself some slack and stop being so hard on yourself, because being hard on yourself doesn't help to resolve the problem. It just adds to the anxiety and the pressure and the stress. You know, we all are in this together. No one has the answer. We are all navigating this new normal. And for every one of us all over the world, we are all going through the same process. We do not have the answer. We do not know what to do. We are learning as we go along. So you need to bear that in mind. You do not have all the answers. Thank you very much, everybody. Good night, good morning, good evening, wherever you are. Be kind to yourself. Please be kind to yourself. Stay blessed and have a fantastic evening. Bye-bye.